Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a Monday edition of, I guess we call this THAT.live. We're going to have a fun little conversation today with Lauren Isaacson, but before we get started, few little announcements. Our online conference is coming. Obviously, we've refactored this year given the COVID nature of the world that we are in. So we are having an online conference on August 3rd, and we're doing it a little different. We're going to have an open spaces thing. We're wrapping up that little new platform, and we'll get that.us launched here hopefully this week, and we can start putting sessions on the board. So more to come around all of that. We're trying very fast to get this done. So with that being said, let's bring Lauren in to the conversation. Lauren, I already called you Laura, and I apologize, Lauren.
So close.
Yes, almost nailed it.
You're so close.
How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing. Before we get started, we're going to talk about research, and I have lots of questions. I have lots of research on the word research. But before we get started, can you just do kind of a quick overview, who you are, where you come from? What is Lauren Isaacson?
Well, let's see. I am an independent UX and market research consultant. I'm based in Vancouver, British Columbia. And so I do mostly project-based work. So people bring me in to work on a specific research project and deliver the results, and then as fast a turnaround as possible, and then go away. So that's primarily my job. So I do a lot of usability testing. I do some strategic exploratory work, depending on the project. And so I work primarily, even though I'm in Canada, I have a U.S. passport. I was born in Los Angeles, and so I've only been living in Canada for the last 10 years. Most of my clients are U.S. based, and so they bring me in when they need me. Most of it is virtual, so people like having to struggle with the transition from in person to remote research is like, why were you doing it in person to begin with? I don't understand.
Says a lot of us these days.
Lab,
that's
so
right.
I don't really know why.
Yeah.
So that's been interesting. I've been sharing like my experience in that and what can be done in person versus remote, and why you would not, an occasion that you don't want to do remote research, which is pretty rare, but especially in tech, it does happen on a regular basis. So that's kind of what I do. I'm also a part of the Qualitative Research Consultants Association. I am co-chair of the Pacific Northwest chapter of that, and I've recently been nominated for the national board, which was a surprise.
Wow.
And so, I'm very excited about that. And I am also on the board of directors for a local sustainable transportation nonprofit. If you look at my website, I take environmentalism pretty seriously. I'm a member of 1% for the Planet. And so when people hire me, 1% of whatever I invoice goes to environmental charity.
Very nice.
And so, that's, I guess
that's Lauren. That's a lot. That's plenty.
Yeah.
You're busy. So I guess my first question is, I think we throw around the word research quite a bit in there. It's a very vague word, and it's probably very contextual based upon the industry you're in. So how would you define what research is in tech? And then to follow that, really, like, what's good? Like, what's a waste of money versus what's actually worth doing?
That's such a big question. What is research? I guess it's I mean, bottom line is it's answering questions.
Okay.
So you have a question that needs to answer word. Sometimes, and not traditionally, but I would say in tech, it's you just keep going down a path and you keep building a minimum viable product or something. You keep going with, your best gut instinct. But now people are starting to question that, and there seems to be more of an eye towards investment in the front end of what is the right product that we build in the first place, or what is the right service that we build in the first place. And so that's where research can come in, and that's the more exploratory research or generative research, trying to develop the foundational understanding to build the right product. So who is a target audience is a really great question. What is the size of that target audience? Another really great question. What do they want? What are their needs? What are their pain points? Those are all really great questions. And then there's the evaluative research, which is once you have a product, is evaluating it. And that's usability testing that we know and love.
Sure.
Which is a very real process, which is just a very set process. We pretty much all follow the same thing, where we have 6 people, hopefully within the target audience, go through a product and tell us what they think about it, or what they or where they're struggling with it. So probably where I see research not delivering value is when there's a few ways. So I would say in the generative part is you don't have a really refined objective. You don't have a really refined question. If your question is too broad and unspecific, you will never be satisfied with the results you get from the research. I don't care how good it is. It will be vague, too unspecific, and you won't, and you'll be wondering, what on earth did we spend all this money for? And I've seen that happen on the other end, where I have been on the client side and seen a research presentation that was commissioned before I got there, and they're just, and like the team is just like, I don't know, we're just not getting, and I'm just like, it was too broad. It was too broad. And so and they were like asking questions during the presentation that were not relevant to what they researched. And so I was just like, you can't ask that. That's really unfair. And then I talked with the team afterwards, and I'm just like, listen, I'm sorry. I've been there. I've been on the other side of that. There's no way you could have satisfied what they wanted out of that. And that's a tough position to be in, because they just spent a ton of money on you, and they're probably never going to do it again because they didn't get what they wanted, even though there's no way you could have delivered, because they didn't even really know what they wanted.
I feel like that, like, if you want to call it a check and balance, is probably something that continues to happen the further you get into knowing more about the subject, right? You get down the road and something else opens up, and then you kind of have to reevaluate the question that's being asked and whether you should go down a different path or not. I don't know. Is that a pretty fair assumption?
Kind of. I mean, there's a whole lot of factors that can be done in that, but I think that probably when you're thinking about investing in research is now the right time. Do we know what we want out of this? And if you don't, then you should probably consider other pathways to go down, either doing competitive maybe just doing your own competitive analysis and seeing what's happening out there, rather than investing a lot of money into an agency or a contractor to do that for you, or getting things that are called syndicated market research reports. So this was something that I recommended to a friend of mine. His marketing, he's a research department of one, and his marketing department wanted research from him on, like, what's the most used app for this function globally or in Europe. And so I'm just like, oh, you want a syndicated market research report? So there are sites online, and all you have to do is Google syndicated market research report, and you can buy, and they're expensive. Don't get me wrong. You're talking like between 5 and 10 grand, depending on the value of the report. But that's a lot less than you'd spend on a researcher to go do a study for you. So you get a lot more value out of it, and it's something it's probably something that they do on a regular basis.
Sure,
so they have ongoing data, not just a point in time data.
Sure.
So yeah, syndicated market research reports are a really good way to kind of maybe avoid that waste of money that can happen.
So when you sit down on a new engagement, and this is one of the questions that kind of came in chat, when you sit down, how are you kind of teasing out the questions or the path to make sure that you're really answering the right thing, or I shouldn't say answering, but researching the right thing?
So a trick I've used in the past is when we're doing that kind of meeting and trying to figure out like what are the objectives, what are the things. Your objectives are important. I put the research objectives on like every document I deliver within a research project. So it's just like, this is what we're trying to find out. Always, whatever like decision we make, we're just like, remember, but this is what we're trying to find out. And so if they go off topic, it's just like, no, this is what we're trying to find out. So yeah, usually you get to those objectives. Either they have a really refined idea of what they want, and so then it's just like, great, I know how to get you this. Sometimes they don't. They aren't really sure or aren't able to articulate what they want. And so something that I've done recently to kind of workshop those objectives is I just ask the team. I'm just like, okay, here's a whiteboard. I'm going to give you just some categories and just like outcomes, decisions, and just like it was random. It just like the categories didn't matter. I'm just like, what do you think you will learn from this research? What do you think the outcome will be? Because they usually are able to kind of like have an idea of what they think the outcome would be or possible outcomes will be. But they aren't able to know like what's the question that's going to get to that outcome. And so then it's just like, so they put all these things on the board. It's just like, they're going to hate it and think it's useless. They're going to think it's super valuable and they want it immediately. They're going to want this out of it. They're going to want that. And so they're able to put those, and then it's just like, okay, great. Let's cluster these and then do a cluster analysis. And you're just like, okay, we're getting themes. And then you can kind of base your objectives off those themes.
Do you, and I'm sure I'm bouncing around in all regards, so feel free to slap me around. But in all of that, then on the complete backside of that, right? The research is done, the things happen. Is there ever a proper follow-up to say, okay, we did this, our assumptions were true or they're not true, we should then do more research? Or I'm not saying it invalidates itself, but hindsight's always 20/20.
Well, that comes from the results. So in the value, when you're trying to figure out if you want to do qualitative versus quantitative is just, I usually tell people, you have a pretty good idea what's going on, you just want to quantify it. Great, you need quantitative research. Qualitative, you have no idea what's going on. And so, but you want to find out. So that's like why questions. If you have a why question, why is this happening? You want qualitative. You're not going to get that from quantitative. Some people do qualitative surveys, which they're doable. You can like get a lot of answers. But the problem I have with that approach to qualitative, that like kind of super big gulp approach to qualitative, is that you can't ask probing questions to follow up. So you can't chase the rabbit. So yeah, there's that aspect to that. So there's different ways you can approach it. One of the adages when you're trying to see if you want to do qualitative versus quantitative is you do quantitative, you will ask questions of 100 people and you will learn 10 things. You do qualitative, you will ask 10 people, you'll have to ask a sample of 10 people and you'll learn 100 things. And in those 100 things, there's a lot of rabbits to chase in there. And so that's happened sometimes where it's just like, well, one person said this. And I had someone ask me, just like, why are we putting that in there if only one person said? I'm just like, because it's interesting. And there might be more to it.
Sure.
And there might be more people who feel that way or who do that thing. But it's up to you, the client, the product owner, to know whether that's a rabbit worth chasing.
So I feel like this is an area where the big companies get it. The majority don't. Probably should be doing a lot more of it. But people don't necessarily know people are doing it. Maybe it's providing some value, not value. I guess how do we all become like design, to give a corollary, like design is a tenet to, a good UI, right? And doing some design research. How do we all incorporate research into building a better product when we don't have a Lauren Isaacson kind of at our disposal?
Well, I'm at anybody's disposal. As a freelancer.
How about somebody with my budget who has not a lot of money?
Well, your budget. Okay, yeah, that's an issue. So yeah, I mean,
it feels like a core tenet to what we should be doing. I feel like we send out surveys, we ask some things, we go on some hunch feelings. Maybe we have some business analysts who feel like they know their business, and we have product managers who probably tend to do that. But I hear you talk, and you're like, no, we're going to go figure out like all of this shit in the right way, such that we can really kind of put money behind it and feel comfortable in such a way that we can move a business in a certain way, which is a lot different than, that's a core competency to a Microsoft or a Google or a Facebook. I'm using those tech companies, just it's any company for real, but how many startups have those kind of fundings? How many little companies don't have that funding to do that?
Funding, timing, research. So, I talk to a lot of people who are junior, who want to get into, who want to look at, or who are designers and they really are fascinated by research, or product owners and they really are fascinated by research and they want to pursue it as a career. And I'm like, I don't recommend it. Because it is people who have chosen this career. I'm just like, okay, if you're just starting this, you need to understand the fact that you are a luxury that not everybody can afford. And so that makes our job very economically sensitive.
Sure.
So when things go down, that's part of the reason why I went freelance, was that I as a researcher, I've been through so many layoffs, because they look around the room and they go, who do we need to actually push this product out? We're going through some hard times. Money isn't available as it was. Who do we actually need in this room to push a product? Well, I need that developer. Pretty sure I need that designer. Probably need the product manager and the project manager to get things rolling. But researcher, you're nice to have, but I don't need you. And so you're usually first to go. So there are quite a few there. I do recommend people who are in design and they are looking to also get into research. I'm just like, awesome. If you can provide a small company that option, just like, not only am I a really good designer, but I am pretty darn good at research too, and I know how to deliver it well. I know how to ask. I know how to write a good survey. I know basic statistics. I can do that, and I know when I'm out of my depth as well.
Sure.
And so that can be a really valuable asset in that, is someone who can actually do the work and do it properly, for a small company that can't have a dedicated person. And when I do occasionally run into teams that I'm just like, hey, if you need a subcontractor, I'm available. And they're just like, oh, we do it all in-house. And I'm like, how on earth are you able to support a research staff full time only? And it's like, to me, that just seems magical. But good on them. And and so there's that. So yeah, back to people who don't. It is a luxury that large companies can afford. Small companies can't necessarily. There does need to be an allocation of budget and time that is not necessarily available. So you do what you can. And I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and I was just like, you know what? In the end, research is kind of like pizza. Even when it's bad,
It's still good.
it's still pizza. Not that I'm saying that, like, the work that someone else does is bad, but I mean, it's like the difference between, like Domino's, which, it's dough and sauce
Right.
and cheese and good, but it's not like the restaurant quality pizza, Neapolitan in a wood-fired stove.
Sure.
With amazing ingredients pizza. But still pizza.
Yeah, but I mean, anything you do kind of up front before you start laying down the expensive cost, right, helps redirect you into a place, hopefully direct you into a place that it yields a better outcome, profit, revenue, whatever those things are, time.
And sometimes, researchers, like freelance researchers like myself, if you ask them questions, it's like, I'm not sure how to approach this, you can pay them just to kind of like point you in the right direction, or to coach you through a process, or to proofread your survey before it goes out.
Sure.
And make sure that you're doing it right.
I'm sure surveys are a disaster.
I really wish people would take them more seriously.
Yeah. I'm sure they're an utter disaster.
They just think it's just, ask questions and you get answers back. And I'm like, no. So yeah, don't think that just because you can't hire a researcher or have a researcher on full time to do the whole thing doesn't mean that you can't get some direction in some way to help you do the process better than you would completely on your own.
How has I've as you have, right? We in this tech world have experienced this. I'm trying to use the right words here. Globalification of our industry, and I think it's kind of one of the best things, about tech is the fact that we get to work with anybody, anywhere, of any culture and desire, and they are completely different. From Europe to Asia to the U.S. to Latin America, whatnot, and that like melding pot in tech is one hell of a superpower that we have. Not that doctors don't necessarily work globally together. There's far less of them. They have to go to an office. They work in their thing. So I'm curious now that, we have a place where your websites are global, your apps are global, your thing is global. How does that impact how you look at research just in general? Do you tend to say, okay, whoa, let's just keep it to the U.S.? Are you hypersensitive about the geography and the culture, or do you take, the enormity of the earth and say, right, where do we want to tackle this?
Yeah, well, you have to pick and choose because you can't afford to answer all questions from all people. I mean, that's one of everything has constraints, and that is a constraint of research. Is if it was the most perfect, amazing research, we would have answered all of the questions from all of the people, and it would be amazing. No one can afford that. And so you have to be discerning. This is what I can afford. What can I get for that? And so usually it's like, okay, who's your target? Usually the target's in the U.S. And so you isolate your thing to the U.S. If you want to do more than that, if your product is indeed global and you have the budget and you can do global research, I have limitations. So as a freelancer, as an individual contributor, even like a small agency, they will have limitations. And so what I will do in that instance, where if I need to say, if it is US or Canadian based, like you want to, like say you wanted to do research on the Asian Canadian market, or say the African American market, if that was very specific of what you wanted, I would be just like, whoa, I don't think you want me, because there is cultural shorthand that I will not understand.
Interesting.
And that I will not be able to get to. And that's the same for international research. So a lot of times with international projects where the company wants to get insights from, say, South Africa and Australia and say Latin America and what of all those, I'd probably reach out to a researcher who is native or has strong experience in those areas and partner with them. So I would be overseeing the project. I would probably run the US one, and then we would push that out to those. And I would be overseeing what's going on and making sure that they're getting what they want out of that. But that person in those countries would be running it in that native language. So if I had to do research in Japan, I would get a Japanese researcher to help me with that, and they would be running the research, and I'd just be sitting in the back room with the translator, making sure that we're getting what we need out of this and that it all lines up.
And I'd have to imagine the cultural differences in that have drastic, in some cases probably have drastic differences for even the simplest of things, just based on their cultural.
In the way people communicate, in the way, there's, sayings and things like that someone from that culture will immediately get and understand. Whereas I'm going to have to spend the time to dig into that and go,
Sure.
I'm not sure what you mean by that. Can you explain it? And they may or may not be able to explain it because it's such a basic part of their culture.
Sure. Of a case like that, then, if you look at the product side of that, do you, if it's something that is so multicultural, is the product team set up to be that multicultural? You know what I mean? Because it's more than just like strings of like, this is how you say it in English and this is how you say it in Spanish.
Well, it's usually like my experience doing it. It's not usually a product team. It's always been like a marketing team that needs to communicate something in different cultures in different ways. Marketing teams, product teams, I haven't worked on a product that needed that. So I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, I think that we're going back to that size issue, whereas a Microsoft will be able to have that in place and probably has an office in that country that can handle that. Adobe, definitely.
Yep. Well, all the big ones for that matter.
Yeah, all the big ones. A small company, I don't think you got that luxury.
Yeah.
So you have to you just have to deal with your limitations.
Yeah, and I asked that in part because, on one hand, we, especially now with all the COVID stuff going on, right? It's easy to say, hey, let's have a virtual thing across the world. Let's check the box on our app and ship it everywhere. But that's not necessarily the right thing to do.
As long as well, not necessarily. I mean, as long as it doesn't cost you anything to do that, there's no reason why you cannot do that. But there is no guarantee. But if you have to, if you want to invest in promoting that product and making sure that people actually know about it and use it, that's different. Then you have to understand: is this, as it is, marketable in China? If so, what do we need to do to make sure that it's successful to ensure its success in China? But if you are just going to put it out there passively and just see what happens, there's no reason why you can't do that. And if it takes off and something you're making money from China, it's just like, we should probably investigate this and see what's going on and why it's so successful in China and whether or not we can make it more
Sure.
successful.
Yeah, totally. So now I'm going to take it a little bit more inwards. And actually, we were talking about this kind of before we even started. I used to speak all over the U.S. and I noticed that the different geographies just in the U.S. act very different. You know, the East is different than the West, and the Midwest, and the South, and then whatever. And you and I were talking before we started, you know, what's the kind of travel between provinces, and having only been to Canada once, I don't really feel like that makes me seasoned in Canadian travel by any stretch. So then from a research, right, we talked about it globally, but then what about culturally within just the US? How big of a factor is that in research?
I've never known it to be a huge factor. Yeah, that's never really been a problem. A lot of the times, so most of what I do is remote research. So that really broadens who you can talk to and who you get feedback from.
I guess I didn't
I
mean
find it very
the
interesting.
physical aspect of it as much as I meant
Yeah.
the regional kind of answers to the same questions. How diverse are they across the
Not really. Yeah, I've never had it really be a problem when we're trying to get, like broad answers from a lot of different kinds of people. So, and even the depth stuff, and especially when it comes to like usability testing and things like that. Can you use this product? Are you able to use it in the way that it was intended? What are issues are you running into, and what can we do to fix those issues? Those are very simple, direct questions. And so those have never been a problem to answer on an intercultural basis. Now, like I said, if I had to like also research in Japan, I would get a little nervous. But the idea of doing it across, as long as I'm able to speak the language fluently, and the U.S. has been really great about like mass marketing its culture. So, you're able to like pick up on kind of a lot of the same nuances. I did have to do a project where I did have to interview, I did have to do research with a branch office in rural Quebec. And they did not speak, a lot of the employees did not speak English. So, or they did not speak English well. And so I had to get a Quebecois moderator to join me on that, and he did a bang up job. They loved him, and so so that was something that I did. I because there was no way I was going to be able to get what I needed from those people, as an English speaking only person.
Sure.
And so that was something I knew I needed to do. And so he came in with me. It was very basic. He did, charge for a day of work, gave me a verbal debrief after, which I integrated into the final report. And so he was able to give kind of like, it was easy for him to do. He just, like spent a day with me and then just gave me verbal debrief after. So he didn't have to spend a lot of time running a report, going through everything, trying to like deliver something that would really sing for me and my clients. And that was invaluable. And it didn't cost us an excessive amount because he limited his work.
Sure.
And we limited his time.
How long or on average, how long is a good research project?
Well, that depends.
Broads.
I don't think there's really any way to do that. It just depends on like what the scope is, how many people you want to talk to, how many different types of groups, when they're available. I can tell you that when it's a business to consumer study, that's usually can be way more efficient and can be done in a very standard amount of time. Whereas when I do B2B studies and we want to talk about trying to schedule one-on-one interviews with executives and or doctors and lawyers and people who don't have a lot of time on their hands and are very busy, those tend to extend because they're just really hard to schedule. So I'm just like, well, we're looking at about 2 weeks of interviews, but probably going to be in 3 or 4 in reality. Yeah, it depends how many people you want to talk to. Do you want to do a quantitative phase first to benchmark any? So yeah, I just pitched one right now that is going to be like 14 weeks just for phase 1.
Okay.
But that's kind of a little bit unique. Usually for like a usability test, it's very straightforward because you're always talking to 6 people. So it's like, okay, we're going to have a week to do this. We're going to have a week to go through our objectives and figure out like what profile we want to recruit and do the discussion guide and write the recruiting screener. Then we that's 2.5 weeks to recruit. A recruiting agency will need 2.5 weeks to recruit. You can do DIY. You'll probably need more than that if you're doing DIY. And then during that time, while they're doing their 2.5 weeks of recruiting, you're working on writing the discussion guide and getting that approved. And then you usually so you only need 6 people. So that's like 1 week of interviews. Maybe you can probably get it done in like 2-3 days, depending on how scheduling works. And then you're looking at, for me, I'd need a week after that to pull together the report. And then we're done. And then that's it. So that's like a week, 3.5 weeks, 4.5 weeks, 5 weeks. That seems like a lot.
No, but that goes pretty quick.
Yeah, it can. That, and depending on the researcher, like everybody I know, or at least my process, I believe this is fairly standard, where I try to be very transparent. And you should be demanding transparency from if you do hire a researcher, you should be, if they are not being transparent with you throughout the process, I would call that as a problem. Because you should be involved every step of the way. You should see what's going on and always be on the same page and be able to course correct if you see something going wrong. And so when the presentation is delivered, nothing should be a surprise. You should, yeah, I saw that in the research. I know, it's just in a really nice archivable format now. I really have a problem when research is done like a magician, where it's like, I'm going to go behind a curtain and I'm going to do some things and voila, bunny.
It only works on AGT.
Yeah. Yeah, if that's their approach they're taking, where they're not involving you every step of the way, if they're not inviting you to all of the interviews or anything, or giving you a back door to see what's happening, what's going on, or giving you a chance to proofread, to like see what they want to do and being okay with that, or I always provide like a preview of what the report's going to be. So it's what I call a top line report. It's just a bulleted list of like, these are the major insights that I can come up with off the top of my head. I'm going to do some more analysis, but these are the main takeaways that seem really obvious to me. And so I hand that over and I'm just like, okay, read this through and get back to me, because if you have a problem with what I think are the main takeaways, and or if you disagree with any of it and you don't tell me before I write the final report and hand it in,
yeah, we've messed up.
That's not cool.
Right. Yeah. So granted, everybody can reach out to you and get you for research, but is there a secret society of researchers? How does one like find a good research person or company, agency? I don't know if agency is really the right word for it, but how do you suss out the good ones?
How do you?
Outside of yourself, of course.
Yeah.
First call Lauren, then do X.
So it depends on what you want. If you want, and there are some researchers who do both. So if you want someone who can do qualitative and quantitative, like myself, those are available. So like I said earlier, I'm a member of the Qualitative Research Consultants Association. And so if you know you need a qualitative researcher, and it doesn't matter, market research or UX research, believe me, they can do both. There are some who actually specialize, so they have a directory of all of their members. And some of those members are international, like they're based in Europe or South America or in Asia. If there are specific people that you would like to meet with, that you would like to talk to, you can like isolate it by, I need someone who has experience in automotive and user experience. And so then you can kind of isolate by that, and it'll give you a list of people who do that. So that's one way. There's also, in the US, there's the Insights Association. They have researchers. And then there's also a directory called greenbook.org. Now you have to pay to be on that directory. I'm not on that directory, but that is a really good resource for all kinds of research tools, research vendors, research agencies, qualitative, quantitative. It has a list of pretty much everything that's available. So I usually, like, people are just like, how do I find people? How do I find a recruiter in Colombia? And I'm like, greenbook.org. How do I find an eye tracking service that works online? Greenbook.org. How do I find something that will, how do I find a research agency that can handle my really large quantitative project? Greenbook.org. So that's a place. You won't get like how qualified, you'll have to like, as far as like how qualified they are, you're going to have to like have a meeting with them. I always encourage that. And what kind of questions do they ask? Do they ask really smart questions about your project? And do they come across as like very confident and capable? And then you can ask to like hear about past projects they've worked on and what they've done and how they approached it and why they approached it that way. Those are all really good questions to ask. But that, just like a design agency or a tech agency, it's that chemistry of just like, I feel like I'm in good hands with this person.
Sure.
This person gets it. They understand us. They seem to have a really good grasp on the project.
Sure.
So yeah, and you can do like an RFP and do that up and just get some people back, but you usually have to like send it out to enough people. I usually recommend talking to at least 3 vendors to see what they get back, and be very specific about what you want. You can ask for just like a 1-pager of how you plan to approach it. And that's a really good way to just kind of like get a very base understanding. But if you're really concerned about the client and how impressed they'll be, I really strongly suggest that you get a full-fledged multi-page proposal, because that will give you a really great insight into what that final deliverable is going to look like.
Sure. So we've got about 15 minutes left, but there's one thing I still want to touch on. So let's say I have an app or website or some product that's already out, and now we want to take it to the next level, and we're not really sure how it's being used. How much of, like you mentioned before, user research, how in depth do folks need to go inside their own product to then be able to do research on it? So I look at it. I look at it in kind of 2, and maybe I'm thinking about all this wrong, but I look at things kind of on 2 sides, right? You have the user research, which is just kind of that's happening kind of outwardly to the customer, and then you have like the research that's happening inside the product of their own behaviors, what they're really doing, not doing, and then the melding of the 2 together. So how intrusive, bad word, but how much instrumentation do we need to have inside of our product to make like your job easier, such that we can make a better product in the longer in the longer run.
So yeah, I think this was so I was with a telco for as a contractor for about a year, and something I always offered but was never taken advantage of, and I really wish it was either through A/B testing. Was a question like, this happened, we weren't expecting it to happen. Can you kind of like help us figure out what the hell happened? Or someone from analytics going, we're seeing some really strange data. And we think we need to figure out more about what's going on.
Which means you have to be acknowledging that, right? You have to measure it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So measuring is a really great thing to do. I know a lot of companies, they do like NPS scores of satisfaction, which I have problems with in its own right. But those but not, even if it's not necessarily NPS and you're using another scale or something like that, and you're getting open-ended feedback, paying attention to those things are great. But if you're asking open-ended data and you're not analyzing that open data, which can be a freaking fire hose.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Don't ask for things you're not going to use. So if you're getting a bunch of, like at the telco, all that open-ended data would go into a Slack channel that was just constantly updating, constantly updating fire hose of but you get some sometimes you get some things that is usually funny. So like someone left a comment that was like super pissed or really funny, and you like copy it to some place and you copy it to another channel. And I'm just like, I'm sad now, and he hurt my feelings. And
been there.
But there are AI tools. In AI, it's as far as sentiment analysis and things like that. It's not perfect, but it's better than just kind of like letting it sit there and run past you without doing anything about it. So if you can use some like AI elements to kind of analyze like what are people saying, and especially like people who have a negative experience with your website, and what are they saying, and what are their themes to what they're saying, or is there something that's overriding all of that we should go deeper into, or we should just look into. We don't even need to like do further research. They're telling us this part stinks, and they're telling us why it stinks.
Yeah.
So let's fix it. We're getting there. So if you're collecting that benchmarking, if you're collecting all of that feedback data and that's valuable, and you're not doing anything with it, then you need to question like why you're even doing it in the first place.
Yeah, I asked that in part. It was a long time ago. I used to do a lot of mobile stuff, and my wife's left-handed, and so anytime somebody would hand me their brand new shiny mobile app that they were super proud of that they built, I would always pick up the phone with my left hand. And so I was, at some conference, once upon a time, and somebody had just built this thing and they got this award, and they were super proud of their user interface design and all this. And they had this like radial button, and I grabbed it with my left hand and I said, yeah, it's pretty. Like, can you swap the UI? Well, no, why would I want to do that? I was like, because it doesn't work for left-handed people. Like I can't reach the other side of the screen for your great like rounded menu that you've completely only made for your right-handed people. And their face was just like, never thought about it. And it seems so simple, but you definitely have to, I don't want to say have all parties at the table, but step out a bit and do your homework.
Those edge cases can be really, and sometimes they're not even like edge. They're not like even that edgy,
right.
But they're categorized under edge cases. So I always advocate for, if you're doing usability testing, try and bring one person in who has a disability that affects their ability to use your product.
Yeah.
And if they have and if you solve for them how to use for using your product, either in a smartphone or online, like say they use screen readers only or something like that, if you can solve for them, you'll probably also be solving for everybody else who uses your product and just has like mild issues.
Yeah.
Didn't even know. Yeah.
For sure.
So there was once so when I went from I ended the contract with that one telco, and I did another contract with another telecommunications company. And we did a series of usability tests, and we did one for mobile, and it was a guy. He was clearly, I don't even know why he agreed to do it. I don't even know what, because he seemed like so just bothered that we were even asking anything of him, even though we were paying him to give us feedback. So yeah, he had 3 kids. He was the sole breadwinner. He's just strapped for time. He seemed super stressed. Just just can we get the whole time it was like, did not seem excited to be there. He was like, it's just like, can we get this over with attitude? But one of the insights he gave is, and so he just kind of went through it. I was just like, go buy a phone. And he just like, boom, boom, boom. Okay, I just bought a bunch of phones for my family. Didn't try and investigate, didn't try and learn more, didn't try to see if he could get the best price. He was just like, yeah, this is too expensive. I walk away from this offer. And I'm like, I was just like, well, it's not like I could tell him, just like, well, you barely tried. But it's just like, and I'm just like, is that how you usually approach that? And he's just like, yeah, absolutely. And so then I had him test something else, and the interface was all in one color. And he was like, well, I can't really see what's going on here because I'm colorblind. And I was just like, oh, okay, great. Because like all of let's go back to like
Right.
shopping for a phone. Now here's this discount call out that's in that color. Did you see that? And he was just like, no, I didn't see that at all. And so they were talking, the team, the client team, they're talking about, okay, how do we communicate this? Like, he was clearly an edge case. Do we follow that? And I'm just like, if you can solve for his problem, if you can make it easy
Right.
for him to get the best deal on a family phone package, you're going to make it easier for everybody else who is strapped for time.
Yep.
And does not want to dig through anything.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, before we end it, what would you want to tell others, or what kind of like lasting piece of something would you like to give others to think about, to go do, to incorporate in kind of their daily tech regimen or whatnot?
Daily tech version. Let's see. Oh, geez, I'm unprepared for that question. Yeah, I guess if you really want to do research, I don't think it's enough to just get out there and do it. Be prepared. Take some classes. Read some books. Don't just don't look at what we do and just go, oh, that looks easy, I can do that. We're working really hard. And there's a lot of knowledge that goes into what we do, and we're professional experts for a reason. Doesn't mean that that you can't do what we do, but I think that if you do want to put this into your practice, if you want to take on some either qualitative or quantitative research, do your homework. Learn how to do it right, because you can really fuck up a pizza.
Yes, you can.
It'll still be pizza.
But it's not good.
That won't be good pizza.
All right, Lauren, where can people find more about you? How can they get in touch with you if they want to?
Sure, I'm pretty easy to find. So if you Google me, I'm on like some of the top listings for Lauren Isaacson. You can also, my website is Curio, so CURIO research.net. And then I'm also on LinkedIn here, and I'm on Twitter. So Twitter is at Curio_research. And yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, so you can find me there too.
So how much research did you do into coming up with Curio Research as your company name?
Not really. I didn't do it. Basically, it was something that I've had because I freelanced on and off, and so I always kind of put it as one of my as kind of like my nom de plume, I guess. And for certain things. And so first it was Curio Consulting because I wanted to keep it broad. And then I was just like, no. Then after this last layoff, I was just like, I'm a researcher. This is what I do. I'm going to put it right out there in the title. So Curio Research. And for me, it was the name was inspired because I love curiosity shops and curio cabinets where people just have like a bunch of weird things in one place. And so if you look at my place, I have a bunch of weird things in a bunch of different places. So yeah, that's how I came up with Curio Research.
There you go. Well, let me just thank you for the time today and sharing everything. It was a fun conversation. I know we had a number of questions around that. And I know, given the COVID stuff going on, that it's not the easiest of times right now. So, best of luck. And for all that are listening and watching, get a hold of Lauren, get some research done. But with that, thank you for the time today, and look forward to chatting soon.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Of course, when you do live things, you can't find the end button.